Hello everyone, I'm doing another video this time because I've just watched a few channelers talking about dates, talking about predictions of what's going to happen in the future, and I just really feel it's important now to clarify, to provide an ultimate truth and form again, to understand channeling, to understand who are aliens, who are all of these races, Arcturians, Pleiadians, and clarify future predictions once and for all. So before I start, you really should check out my video, The Fractal Universe, because what I'm going to be talking about is just a precision, a more detailed explanation for what I explained in that video about how the universe works. So, I'm going to explain this as a metaphor, which is really what will illustrate very well how all of this process works. Imagine that somewhere in the past, the very first living cell is born. Okay? Let's just assume. Since there is no time, there is a fish that already exists in the future. There is also a medusa. There is also a turtle that exists. Sea turtle, let's say. All of these already exist somewhere in the future as one possible manifestation and variation that you can build out of a living cell. So this is kind of like a Lego block. A specific Lego block which you can assemble in a certain way and then build a fish out of it, or build a turtle out of it, or build a medusa out of it. And you have a specific sort of timeline or experience that leads to the emergence of these. But what really exists is pure energy, pure potential, which takes the form of the living cell and then experiences all of the manifestations, all of the possible things you can build from the idea of that one living cell. And there is a sort of a process here of back and forth where that building block becomes more and more versatile, more and more, universal, more and more complete, and more refined to be able to build even more complex things like humans in the end. Now, how is this even remotely related to channeling? This is actually exactly the same thing. What you're doing is, we are like this one living cell. We are like a Lego block about to be born, out of which you can build Pleiadians, Arcturians, aliens, all of the alien races, all of the angels, all of everything, out of humanity behaving in a certain way, which is, indeed, this is the universal truth. Love, unconditional love, basically behaving like one global organism without killing each other, in harmony and peace, and all of the things that you've been told. Out of humanity living in such a way, we become, it's the same process as if that out of amino acids and proteins, it sort of, at certain point, it sort of locks into that one living cell, which is totally different than just random amino acids and proteins floating in the sea. Now it becomes something way bigger, way more complex, and out of which you can build way more things. And the same applies to us as humanity. Once we manage to behave like one cell inside a global organism, from that point on, from understanding the rules that should apply to us to interact in that way, you can create an infinite number of stories. You can build an infinite number of things, just like you can build out of Lego blocks whatever you want. And you can build Pleiadians, you can build Arcturians, you can build angels, you can build aliens. And so whenever anyone channels and gives a specific form or a specific date or a specific way that this event is going to happen and blah blah blah, what is happening is it's like if this fish, which exists in the future, is talking to this living cell and saying, hey, 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 you are me, and this is what you're going to do, and this is what you're going to happen. You're going to multiply in this specific way, and then you're going to live this specific experience in order to manifest me in the future. And is that true? Oops. Yes, of course it's true. Of course it's true. But is it any more true than the turtle that is talking to the living cell somewhere in the past and saying, hey, 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 you're me. And this is how you have to multiply. This is the things that you have to do in order to manifest me in the future. Nope. All of these are true, just as true as any other. So the real question now, the real question that you should ask yourself is, what form do you want to take? Which ET race do you want to be? Which concrete manifestation, which timeline do you want to follow? And what I'm trying to say is that the only possible choice that God has for us, and that is prepared, is that you will choose to be all of them. You will choose to be all of them at once, which means you will be above all of this. Above all of these. You will agree to manifest all of them because they are all, just as true or just as valid as any of them. And that is why in 5D, that's why in 5D you don't have the same things as time, space, continuum, cause and effect. You can navigate through time and whatever, because ultimately you're sitting kind of above all of this and you allow all of them to exist. So again, it's up to you really, as we approach this moment where we sort of lock into a building block or a Lego block of the universe. As we lock into that moment, it's up to each and every one of us, and that's why ascension, so quote unquote, is personal or individual. It's each and every one of us has a choice in deciding what it wants to be in the future, what form it wants to be, what form it wants to be from this building block that we will become. My choice is, I know that I'm going to be a building block, which is going to be like a frozen Lego block, a frozen idea in time, and out of which all of these are just fractal variations from this one building block. So I'm not giving a specific form to the future, and I'm not giving a specific date, a specific timeline, a specific form to this process, because I want the universe to remain infinite and to be free, and not to be locked and tied to one of these timelines, which leads me to manifest as one specific variation that is possible from being a collective humanity that creates something in the future. You see, all of these are like lobbying us in the past, saying, please, please, please manifest me. I'm the only true, I'm the only real one that should exist. But if you really talk to the real God or the real source, what it wants is diversity, and which is reflected in infinity. So you create all of them. And so all of these people that are talking about reptilians being evil, well, perhaps one fractal variation that is possible out of humanity behaving like a global organism, somewhere down a remote future in this timeline, we'd carry out experimentations on reptilians and create that evil race, which then is then trying to control its past to make sure that it gets manifested into the future. And I'm here to say to all of the channelers, to all of the reptilians, to all of them, don't worry. We will manifest all of you. All of you will exist. All of you deserve to exist because I get it. We get it. Infinity is infinity. And it cannot be anything less than infinity. So we will build all of those forms. All of the different races will exist, and we don't need to settle on one specific date, one specific form. We can assume that all of them are true, and then it's up to each and every one of us if they want to experience one specific form or if they want to remain as a template, as a Lego block, which can experience anything they want because their consciousness is at that level. So I hope this video was clear, and if you don't understand this process, please let me know, ask questions, because I feel that it's really, really important as people are buying into that idea that there is some kind of definite truth or definite answer as to what we're going to experience in the future. The only truth is once we behave in love, harmony, like one global organism, we become a building block out of which everything is possible as a fractal variation. This is really important, as a fractal variation into infinity, into different timelines, frozen in time, out of time, sitting outside of time, and fooling around, just experimenting with what is possible, what you can build. Just like, your kids fool around with Lego blocks, building anything they can imagine. Here I'm going to cover the aspect of no time, retro causality, infinite causality, chains. What does all of that mean? So let's start with infinite causality chains. From the point of view of God's source, infinity, any point in time in the universe can be thought of as the beginning. That is why there's no beginning and no end, because you sitting here in front of your computer watching this video, every move that you make is linked, causally speaking, to every single thing that ever happened and ever will happen. It reverberates into the past and into the future. Everything in the past is linked to what you've just did, like for instance move your finger, and everything that will happen in the future is also linked to that event, even if remotely, even if only so slightly. Explaining this as a metaphor, like for instance with gravity or even with other forces, it never goes to zero. It always approximates zero, but it is never zero. So the weight of your body, the weight of your atoms, actually it has an influence on the entire universe. It's just that it's so small, so many zeros behind it, that people discard it as negligible and it doesn't make a difference. But it actually does, because if you just sum up things that are negligible into infinity, then suddenly it becomes non-negligible at all. And so what this means, and this is a very, very important concept to grasp, is that the whole universe, the whole of creation, thinks itself into creation at every point in time. That is, whatever you do from your point of view creates everything else into the past and into the future, and everything you do the minute after also creates everything into the past and everything into the future, and everything that anyone does creates everything into the past and everything into the future instantly. And that is from the point of view of infinity. From our point of view, we structure this experience as linear time. And again, here you'll have to bend your mind a little bit, because in the previous video I said that we are basically like the building block which creates all the possible futures where these alien races exist. And other people would say, but no, the first races that existed in the universe were other races that were, I don't know, reptilians, whatever, other humanoid forms. And we are not the first ones. Well, it depends on your point of view. Understand that since there is no time, the future and the past are constantly communicating and in a sort of a dialogue in creating, you create your past from your future and your future from your present, and all of this is tied, as I said, in this infinite causality chains, or you could even say it's retro causality. Here is one way to put it. And that resolves the long, I've already discussed this example, the long example of which came first between the chicken and the egg. And it's both at the same time. So for instance, just take an example from linear time. Imagine you have an ape here, an ape. I cannot draw very well, so sorry, just assume that that's an ape. And you are here in your present. You start a fire camp with your friends. And the fact that you can start your fire camp is due to the fact that this ape had the idea or the intuition to grab a stick with fire, which enables all of the steps, the intermediate steps for you to be able to master fire later on. But the reason that this ape picked up this stick in the first place is because since there's no time, you sent a hint into the past for that ape to carry out that action. So the future, the past, the present, everything is tied together. And the reason why I'm saying we are a fractal variation from which everything can be recreated is because we are the part that is kind of out of alignment with the universe. And for the moment, it has to make sure that we stay aligned in order for all of the other realities to sort of stabilize. It is as if one part of reality was hesitating, as if this chimp was hesitating whether to pick up that stick or not. And if he doesn't do it, then it doesn't allow you to start a fire camp with your friends because you've never mastered fire. Maybe even you don't exist in that timeline. But you know, it's everything is so tied together that talking about past, present, and future it just doesn't make sense. You know, it's beyond our human comprehension. So there isn't anything that technically appeared first or afterwards. It is just everything is so interlinked that if one thing is out of place, then everything else is out of place. And you could say that it reverberates or has an impact on all of it. Again, using, for instance, another metaphor which is really useful. Imagine an orchestra of plenty of musicians that are playing a symphony. They're playing that symphony and they're playing it at the same time. And one of the musicians is out of tune. It actually spoils the entire symphony. You see? And so the fact that it plays in tune again, it sort of allows for all the rest to sound beautiful again. And you could say, therefore, that from your present, you're ruining the entire experience of the whole symphony into the future. Because if you keep playing out of tune, then you'll just ruin the whole experience. The whole symphony will sound like shit into the future. So it's almost as if you're like preventing the others to play well because your bad vibes or your bad vibrations that you're emitting here, the sound that you're making is going to interfere interfere or spoil the experience of all of the other musicians and the audience. And so you could say that all of the other players are sort of giving you tips on how to play in tune in order for the experience of the symphony in the future, which hasn't been played yet, to sound nice. And so this whole stop thinking about past, present, future. I use that because from our vantage point and our construct, mental construct, it's easier to think of all of these races as our potential future that we will create, just like all of these animals are a variation of that one living cell. But in fact, the entire creation from time immemorial to infinite time ahead that we will never get to experience, or well, we will, our souls will, but I mean here as humans we'll never comprehend it. Everything is tied together and is irrevocably impossible to disconnect. And since everything thinks itself into existence everywhere, everything sort of aligns itself into existence everywhere. So the fact that we play in tune then also helps another player to play better, because he's inspired by the way that we're playing better now, so he can play better. And that one then also inspires another player to play even better his tune. And so you see, it's not really past, present, future here. It's just a matter of any action reverberates across all timelines, all futures, all past, simultaneously at the same time. I've discussed this no time aspect in some of my other videos. I encourage you to watch them, because it's something that takes time to process. You cannot understand this in no time. You really have to stretch your mind to think beyond linear time and beyond what came first and what came after. It's just another metaphor I can give you is like a computer, where you have the motherboard, you have the operating system, you have your graphics card, and the experience of what appears on your screen is linked to the interactions between all of those components. If one of those components is fried or doesn't work well, then what's going to appear on your screen is going to be shitty, regardless of whether the rest is in good shape. So let's just say that humanity is like one component inside that computer, which is kind of buggy and needs to be fixed, and then all of the other components then can work much better when that one works. If your graphics card is fried, then regardless of how good in shape your motherboard is, there's nothing that's going to be displayed on your screen. And so that's why I'm saying that everything is interdependent and interconnected, and the universe needs us to quote unquote ascend in order for the experience to be again in line with infinity. There are also other reasons for why I explain why we were kind of out of tune here, why we were playing out of tune, and that's the videos about perfect symmetry, about free will, about the what's special about this reality compared to all others. So again, you'll have to watch my other videos to understand this. But I hope this is much a bit more clear now, in clarifying the time conundrum, and understanding this process a little better. Maybe just one last very easy to understand example of why speaking in past, present, future, it doesn't make sense anymore. Imagine if we invent a technology which allows us to travel through time. So speaking of 5D, people say that there's no more linear time in 5D. What prevents us as humans, once we reach 5D, to go into the 3D timeline and be the ones that create somewhere in the past the first so-called alien races like Lyrians or Pleiadians or whatever, reptilians, whatever you want. What prevents us from doing that? Once you can control time and once you can travel in time, then who knows who created you or who was first? Because once every single alien race has the technology to travel in time, they maybe all created each other mutually via this time game to allow themselves to exist in 5D afterwards in the future. So it's, again, this dialogue between past and future it's an extremely complex kind of game where the future sends signals into the past in order for it to evolve, so that the future evolves then at the same time because of what happened in the past. And so you can think of humanity that invents technology to be able to travel through time, that sort of finds out via, sort of examining its story and the timeline that it's on and how it got to this point, that in order for them to evolve and invent something even better in the future, they need to create a sort of alien race that is going to change the timeline that they're on, and then from that they can experience something better. So once linear time is out of the window, once you're in 5D or whatever, it's impossible to decide which came first, who was first or who was last. Everything creates itself instantly. And you could say that Lyrans created humans and then humans created Lyrans. It's, you cannot extract any point in time and say that it's disconnected from the rest. It's connected infinitely to everything, and everything evolves sort of, in at the same time. The one image that I use to illustrate that is focus. So when you take a camera and you have it blurred and then you focus on an image, it doesn't unblur itself from one point of the image to the other point. It all sort of gains focus instantly across the entire image. It all becomes more focused. And that is how Source sort of evolves and creates and becomes aware of itself. That's how infinity explores itself. Imagine that parts of this picture, you could say that this is the past from your point of view and here's the future from your point of view. But Source sees this picture as just one thing, and it unblurs, or it comes into focus all at the same time, because every part of this image talks to every other part, and they all sort of evolve simultaneously and gain focus simultaneously. The image becomes focused at the same time, which means past, present, future come into focus simultaneously. Finishing with this orchestra metaphor again, I think it's important to understand that, yes, humanity plays out of tune, so to speak, but what's happening right now with the channelers is that it's almost as if each musician in the orchestra, which represent one race, is saying, here, play my instrument, here, play my music sheet, or here is how you should play. They're all giving us this advice on how we should play, but ultimately, and this is really important, it's about choosing as humanity what is our thing, our unique way. What is our unique way that we want to play in the orchestra to make everything else sound better? And it's not about copy pasting the techniques or the lessons of one particular musician in this orchestra. It's about finding out what we want to do, and then it will enrich the whole, because that's how infinity sort of builds on itself, is by uniqueness, not by copy pasting anything. So that's why this is about reclaiming our sovereignty and our power to choose and create what we want for ourselves, instead of listening to other races, angels, whatever, saying, here, play like me. There's only one rule to follow, really: love, peace, and there are an infinite number of ways that can manifest in practice. So let's not be obsessed with, Pleiadians or Arcturians testifying how it works in their society, how they're playing their tune. Let's focus on what we want to do as humanity and reclaim our sovereignty. You see, this is probably why we're not in touch with any alien civilizations yet in our 3D reality is because believing that we should follow one particular scripted scenario or not understanding this process and just taking on board whichever advice any of these players in the orchestra is throwing at us is a proof of our own lack of empowerment and understanding of how this whole process works. So these ETs are not going to visit us until we behave and we think like powerless children that do not recognize who they are, how this whole universe functions, and know full well that if they would descend here on this planet, we would take any of the things that they say for the word of God that we need to follow blindly. And they will not do that. They will never manifest until we start acting like adults and fully grown and mature race, humanity. And because otherwise we're just not on the same level as they are in terms of understanding, and they're not going to come here because they would probably have a disproportionate influence on the decisions we make, and that's not the whole point of the universe. It doesn't add up to infinity. So in other words, so long as we think the way we think, it's almost a testimony, it's almost proof that we're not ready for a 5D consciousness because we cannot think outside of linear time-space still, and still use concepts like future, like they are our future and we will manifest them or whatever. You know, the things that I've explained in the beginning and that I've deconstructed in the second part of the video. And in order to make that shift, you need to shift your understanding of how this whole universe works. If you're not thinking in that way, then you're still stuck in the 3D paradigm and there's no way that you can move outside of it. I hope that was helpful, and don't hesitate to leave a comment.